Good evening. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to see you all here. I'm Pam Duell. I'm the interim executive director for Opera House Arts, and I just would like to welcome you to our theater as we kick off this second Talk of the Towns. Just some notes from the theater. The Color Purple will be this weekend, and then in 2 weeks we'll be showing Poor Things. Rated R, so think about it before you bring all the kids. Also trivia and open mic every month on Thursday. Check out our website or subscribe to the e-news. Don't miss a thing. So, trash talk, one of my favorite subjects. And I come by it honestly. When my daughter Ori was a toddler, I served as vice chairman of the New Haven Solid Waste Commission. And it was the first and only time I ever had a police detail assigned to me, because we went for the biggest recycling percentage of any municipality to date with that. We went for 30%. The mass burn incinerator, which we shoved back, was not happy. And thank you, Biagio Delito, for assigning me my own cop for about a month. Coming from that, I actually sailed across the Atlantic Ocean on a 156-foot schooner, and we did plastic sampling the whole way across. And this was 1989. Half of the crew was Soviet. The other half was American. We went from New York to Leningrad. We did plastic sampling with a Newstein net, a surface net, twice a day for 30 minutes. And we found plastic in 1989 in every sample but one. So this problem's been building for a long time, and it's time to start dealing with it. But this was even before people were looking at microplastics, which my friend Abby Barrows will be talking about. So stay tuned for that tonight. I think that's it from me, other than to introduce Linda Nelson, who needs no introduction in this facility. Linda, as you know, is one of the founders of the Opera House Arts, I should say. and is now the Director of Economic Development for the town of Stonington, and is having a meeting as we speak, so we'll let that conference, you know. Are we all good?
Yeah.
All right, well, you've been introduced, and is there something I can do to fill in for you while you're up here?
It was a password issue.
Okay.
It's on the Post-it, so there you go. Password in the laptop. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Pam, so much, and thank you, the Opera House. It's really great to see people out here who care about these Talk of the Towns. It's interesting that people don't care maybe as much about waste reduction as they thought they cared about sea level rise, but I want to tell you that they are deeply related, and you're going to hear about that tonight. So when you leave here, go out and tell all those other folks who were here for the climate change and sea level rise one that they missed the next step here in how we're going to do this. So we also want to thank Island Institute, who is really generously sponsoring this entire series. Thank you to the Island Institute. And thank you to Burnt Cove Market, who are our food sponsors tonight. And you're going to hear that food waste is a really big issue, and there's a lot of food out on that counter. So when you get up and you go out, take food, okay? Because we do not want to waste that food. It's great to have Burnt Cove Market being the sponsor for this, because you can also hear tonight, I want to give them a big shout out. They've been really working on their cardboard recycling with the Stonington Transfer Station and doing a really good job of it. So round of applause for Burnt Cove Market. You know, the great thing about doing rounds of applause is that showing appreciation makes all of us feel better, right? So whenever we show appreciation for somebody, we feel better. So now you guys are all feeling better, right? And how are you feeling? No, seriously, shout it out to me. How are you guys feeling tonight? Good. Good? Good? Tired?
Worried.
And I'm really asking, I mean, I would ask anyway probably, but the truth is, this is the first time we've gathered again since we had 3 major storms that were hugely destructive here. Our last meeting was December 6th. It was right before the first of those storms. And if you remember, if any of you were here and heard that panel, they really talked about the anxiety and depression that these big issues that feel beyond our control, that can feel overwhelming, how they make us feel. So in addition to just dealing with the practical issues and to dealing with, you know, all of the logistics of sea level rise, the damages, the recovery that we're going through for our working waterfront especially, we also have to deal with the anxiety and the depression and the sense of overwhelm. And Susie, Dr. Susie I call her, from the Island Institute, she was one of our panelists last time, she and Dr. Alexa from Maine Center for Coastal Fisheries both talked about hope and how you find hope in those situations which feel really overwhelming. So I think it's important to acknowledge the overwhelming nature of all of the challenges that we're talking about in this series, and also to find the hope, because this is what the hope is. The hope is that we all come together like this, and we creatively problem solve together, because that's the only way we're gonna get ourselves out of some really sticky messes. So tonight, you're gonna hear about another sticky mess. Tonight's theme is reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, how we minimize local impacts. And in minimizing local impacts, you're going to hear us talk about costs as well as hard stuff, okay? So the money piece as well as the hard stuff. And before we do that though, because we're talking about the creativity of being together, I really like to start with something creative. So we're going to start again with a little 2.5-minute film clip. And how many of you in the audience saw the movie in 2008 when it came out, and we showed it here, the movie from Pixar named WALL-E? Anybody see it? Either then or after? So if you don't know, WALL-E is a really frightening movie for kids, and even though it's an animated film, and so we had kids run out of the theater crying, and in truth, it is a really dystopian, dark film with a very friendly little robot. But the theme of it is, the storyline is that we have polluted the planet so much and created so much garbage that the big corporation that's been responsible for most of this has to send everybody up on a cruise in space for 5 years while this little robot WALL-E cleans up. and hopefully it gets cleaned up in 5 years, and the people come back, maybe. Anyway, 2.5-minute clip from Wally. Let's see how you like it, and then we'll get on with our panel. Go ahead, Josh. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much. While the screen goes up and our panelists come on stage, if you haven't seen Wally and you don't know what's going on there, that little robot is compressing all of the trash that has been left on Earth from which the humans had to run and building walls with it, thus Wall-E. And welcome our panel. Hello, special guests. So the way this all works, and we can even have maybe a little more house light if you want, Josh, or if you can, is that this is really a conversation between our invited special guests who have lots of information to share, but in conversation with you all. So you all are as much a part of this conversation as these guys. It's why I'm down here on the floor. I'm going to be watching you as closely as I watch them. If you have something to say, just put your hand up. I will try to catch you. And it can be a comment, it can be a question, it can be whatever. Let's not make it be a speech, obviously, so that we can have lots of people talk. And just remember that if you've said something once or asked a question once, I may not come back to you just because we try to give a diversity of people time to speak and participate and ask questions. So this is illustrious guest speakers that we have though with us represent a real variety of positions and different approaches to the challenge that we're talking about tonight. So starting from the left, we've got Abby Barrows. Abby is probably known to a lot of you. She's a Stonington resident and she's a microplastics expert. She's a marine scientist, a research scientist. And that's her specialty. And she also owns Deer Isle Oyster Farm and is farming oysters and kelp these days. So welcome, Abby. Sitting next to Abby is Averi Varney. Averi is from the Hancock County Planning Commission. And we really wanted to have that regional approach to this issue tonight. So Averi works with a lot of towns on their comp plans and lots of different issues. And we're really interested to hear what she might share from other communities. Thanks for driving down tonight, Averi. In the center, Kathleen Billings, Stonington Town Manager. I think she needs less of an introduction than I needed. So she's been the town manager for 15 years at least, something like that. And sitting next to her is, and she's been on the island for longer than that, but I'm not going to say how long. And so sitting next to Kathleen is Jim Dow. Jim is a selectman in Blue Hill. He's actually on their transfer station committee, and Jim was the founding executive director for Blue Hill Heritage Trust. Welcome, Jim. Sitting next to Jim is Kate Thompson. Kate Tomkins. Thank you. Kate is the founder of Chickadee Composting, which is now located in Surrey, but which was founded here actually at the Stonington transfer station. And Kate is from Brooksville originally, and she spent several years doing international human aid in Africa and in Asia before coming home and starting Chickadee Composting. And finally, on the end, we have our representative of Maine's Department of Environmental Protection, Brian Beneski. Thank you, Brian, for coming all the way from Augusta tonight. Let's give them a round of applause before they even start. Because appreciation makes us feel good, and we are very appreciative that you guys are here tonight. So, Jim, I'm actually going to start with you. We have, should be on, just, is there a little mute button on it, maybe?
Yes. Okay, it's on.
There we go. All right. One of the kind of things we've been thinking about is that we all have the ideal things that we want for the world. And in this case, maybe for recycling and for waste removal, right? And in some cases, that ideal rests with putting it on other people. So sometimes I think, we think about waste and getting rid of our waste, and we think about, well, what can the towns do better? What can the state do better? What can anybody do better? So tonight we're going to kind of shift the tables a little bit, right? Because we're all going to ask ourselves what we as individuals can do better. So we're going to hear about those ideals, what we want, some of the opportunities we might have, and then and also the realities. I mean, we've got a town manager and a selectman here. Those realities of financial issues and how we pay for all this are very real for taxpayers and for the sustainability of communities. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about the situation you guys are in Blue Hill with your waste.
Well, our budget's $1.3 million to get rid of waste, to transfer it, I should say, because that's what we do. We're unusual in the sense that Blue Hill, some years ago, set up an interlocal agreement with the town of Surrey, in which we both own a transfer station. Blue Hill owns 2/3 ownership, and Surrey has 1/3. And then we did a license agreement with 3 other towns by which they could use the transfer station. And then in 1991, actually when the town decided to join 120 other towns in this municipal review committee, which would handle the waste for all of those towns. And that took new life in 2016, when the former Perk plant, was changed ownership, and they burn trash. They did, and they're not right now. They're not doing anything. But that changed ownership, and they lost their subsidy. So it became very expensive, and so this municipal review committee, of which Blue Hill joined, decided they would go with this new outfit called Fiberite, which was this new idea for recycling, and they promised 80% diversion, so it wouldn't go in that means diverting it from a landfill, which is the least desirable way to get rid of trash. And so, of course, Fiberite didn't work. I have to say, the towns are sold they're in a tough spot, because it looked as though the Perk plant was going under, and what we're going to do, and so they bought, how can I say this? I guess they got hooked. They bit the bait and went with this Fiberite, which has turned out to be sort of a long, difficult story, and it's not working yet, and all of our trash is still going to landfill, Juniper Ridge, which has increased the cost tremendously. The only good thing about being part of the MRC at this point is our tipping fee, the per ton cost to transfer it to somewhere has stayed relatively stable, with annual cost increases based on the CPI. but the transportation costs are huge. And so every year the cost has gone up. Well, from 2021 to 22, it went up 22%. From 22 to 23, 12%. From 23 to 24, it's going up another 11%. And it's an expensive business. And what we've tried, one thing that happened, am I going on too long?
I'm going to ask you a question any second. Go ahead.
Let's jump right in. One thing we have that happened by going with this fiberite idea, they were going to recycle everything. Just single stream it, put it in there, and this massive plant they built that didn't really work completely, or much at all, was going to divert it and they were going to recycle stuff and use the product of the trash. But it got people away from recycling because they figured, oh, I don't need to do that anymore because it's just, so everything went into the waste stream. So that's been a problem.
And exactly, and so now you know why I showed the clip from Wally, right? This is real, so to put a little bit of context behind some of the acronyms and some of what Jim is saying so that you guys understand. So all of the waste from here, from Blue Hill, is trucked somewhere. And right now, because the two major plants that are waste to energy plants, so Perk was a waste to energy plant, and this fiberite is supposed to be a waste to energy plant. Which means,
well, if I can just correct it, it was not a waste to energy. It was a waste. It was a waste to repurpose the waste, take the cycle, make things out of it, and actually generate some natural gas, regenerative natural gas, they call it RNG or something like that. Yeah. So, but it was never to burn.
Great. So these two plants are supposed to be receiving all of this waste from all of our communities, from our homes and then our communities. Gets trucked up there. The trucking is incredibly expensive, and the farther away you are, like Stonington, the more expensive it gets. And then basically right now, because both these plants are closed for financial problems and technical problems, all of the waste is going to a landfill, which is up north of Orono, so that's why the trucking and the transportation has increased. And that landfill, as you can imagine, again, Wally, okay, is supposed to be closed in 2 years because there's more trash than that landfill or any landfill can hold, really. So you can see the bind that your municipal officials are in here. And Averi, I was going to ask you if you had some perspective on what you're seeing happening in the field around that.
All I'm hearing is just how expensive it is for towns and the work that they're dealing with. A lot of HCPC's work over the past year and a half has just been focusing on how we can bring our solid waste program back. We, historically have had, HCPC had a very robust solid waste program funded through the USDA Solid Waste Technical Assistance Grant, and since that came on, we've been looking for ways to bring the program back.
What would a solid waste program for you guys look like? What does that mean?
I've got a couple different ideas. I think the number one thing I hear is our hazardous household waste collection event. It's the thing I get the most amount of calls for, of people looking for, we've done this event for decades, HCPC had. So that's the number one thing. And then we would like to look towards establishing long-term solutions. I know the Chickadee Disposal District just got an earmark for congressionally designated funding for a year-round hazardous waste collection facility. And then a lot of what HCPC had done in the past is providing educational materials, helping to establish transfer station agreements and committees, and just the technical assistance side of things. Swap shops, I'd like to see us be able to provide some technical assistance to communities with establishing swap shops, composting programs, and then bringing folks together. I think that's really the role that HCPC can play, is regional facilitation, bringing together solid waste professionals, municipal leaders, businesses, and just hosting conversations.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And this is such a conversation. I think we've got other municipal officials in the audience. I know Jim Fisher's here from Deer Isle. Actually, we've got our state legislator, Holly Eaton, is here. I think there's somebody from Maine. Catherine Oak is in the audience here somewhere. So it really is a conversation for all of us. So don't be afraid to hold up your hand and ask a question or make a comment. Kathleen, there's always these different kinds of transfer stations like Blue Hill, Surrey, and like Stonington. And I know that Stonington actually decided to do some of its own recycling in terms of cardboard, for example, and glass. Do you want to talk a little bit about those decisions?
Yeah, Stonington's always had a mindset towards recycling, with the select board and the leadership there. And it's, we've had, balers. We've recently installed a second baler because some of the thought process was, mix paper and some of that, and then try to have one designated just for cardboard, because the past few years since the COVID, we're getting more and more cardboard all the time, shipping, and bricks and mortar stores aren't as popular as what they used to be. So trying to keep up with that. But recycling is expensive to do because it requires manpower, it requires equipment. I mean, right now I think we're somewhere around $90 a ton just to heave it into the hopper, to have it go away. But when you're doing recycling itself, the manpower, the building, equipment, and everything else, we're probably somewhere, $150 a ton or more, depending on, what it is you're doing. And I think for us, I don't remember exactly the recycling figure that we had, but I did check on the revenues today, and we only took in like $6,600 for what we had sold for our recyclables. So it's cost us way more to do it than what we get. If we bumped up that, then we'd obviously probably have to have another building. We'd have to have even more balers. But one of the biggest problems that we have is there is virtually little market for plastics. I know they have their little insignias on and stuff like that, but it's incredibly difficult for us to move plastics.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. Everybody sees that little triangle with a little number on it, and you think, oh, this is recyclable. And, there are some companies, Maine does some of it, that can sort it by those numbers, and different resins in those plastics have different amounts of salability. But it is, the markets are very small, and it's very hard to make money. And when you're here, you don't want to do the sort yourself, and if you got to transport it far, far away to somebody who will do the sort. So, you're starting to understand, I hope from hearing this, is something about like the cost, and it's not that we shouldn't pay a cost for getting rid of this waste. Obviously waste has a cost. The question is always like, where does that cost lie, right? Because when you hear of the towns, Jim and Kathleen talk about the cost, they're talking about your tax rate, because the more the cost of waste removal goes up, the more your taxes go up. So there is a direct connection to your home expenses to the costs. It's not like there's just this municipal budget out there that can do things. So that's the connection there. Brian, want to talk to us a little bit from the state perspective, the Department of Environmental Protection? And actually, as you get your mic going, I want to give a shout out. We've got Mike Thompson in the audience tonight. He's one of our really amazing transfer station attendants and managers. So Mike, thanks for being here tonight, and thanks for all the work you do. Ryan.
Sure. So I'll start with the cost of recycling. So it's, packaging is the thing that people want to recycle. It makes up, depending on the study you've seen, 30 to 40% of your trash. So the legislature passed a program, extended producer responsibility for packaging, and put this program in a nutshell. It will extended producer responsibility means putting some of the end-of-life costs onto the manufacturer or producer of a product. So the idea of this program is to fee the manufacturers or producers of products what the cost is for their packaging of their material. And the way we will do that is by determining what the costs are for recycling, all the municipalities, and then coming up with a per ton fee that then will charge the producers of material. And then that will then be reimbursed to the municipalities that want to participate in the program. And the way to participate is to provide the collection for a list of material that's considered readily recyclable and submit reports regarding your costs. So that's going to go into effect in a couple of years. We're still doing some rulemaking and that type of thing, and then we'll have to hire a stewardship organization to run it. But we're seeing that should hopefully have payments to municipalities that are participating in 27.
Great, thank you. And that is in the rulemaking stage, and what that means is that you may ask something or say something, and Brian may say he cannot answer that because you will have to go and make the comment on the rulemaking process, okay? And we're happy to talk to you about that afterwards. It's this somewhat arcane state process.
Yeah, we've just submitted our rules for to the Board of Environmental Protection for a public comment period, and I may have to say that's a great comment question. Why don't you submit that as part of the public comment?
Yeah. You know, one of the questions I didn't ask Kathleen and Jim is how much tonnage you guys are actually shipping out of here on a weekly basis. I think it just gives people some perspective to know that.
Well, we've just compiled our figures for the end of last year, and we were like 2,200 tons just for the household garbage. And then, of course, we have what we call white goods, we have demo debris, then you've got shingles and everything else. But just for household garbage alone was 2,200 tons, which when I started in with this like 15 years ago, because we were allowed so much gross annual tonnage under the contract with PERT, we were right around 1,000 tons. So in that period of time, the trash has increased, the tipping has increased, and now the thing that we're really fighting is the transportation, because as what Jim says, both plants are down now. And I mean, for us, we probably got, 2 cans in the winter that goes out. In the summer, it's almost daily for the cans. We alternate, the hoppers. That was one of the best things that I pushed the selectmen for. And I thought they were going to kill me at first when I said, we need to have another hopper because it's coming. But they were good, and I understood. Everybody said, yep, smart thing to do. But it's not a smart thing because we've got more trash. But our budget has also doubled too, in that with the increased tonnage and stuff with it. So it's difficult.
How about you, Jim?
4,300 tons, not pounds, tons. So many trips a year. I forget how many, 256, I think, something trips to this year. It's been all to Old Town, to the Juniper Ridge. I just want to say, the answer is reduction. There's no solution here except all of us reducing the amount of trash the amount of things we throw away. We've talked about having like a bag fee. Many towns you buy a bag and it costs you $5, something to throw away. And there's a lot of resistance to that. People say, no, it's free, I pay my taxes, this is free, it's just garbage. And so it's sort of it's a hurdle, but I think until it touches them more closely, because it's just going to the dump and throwing away stuff you don't care about and let someone else worry about it. But it's not going to lead to any reduction, in my mind.
Well, the other thing is it's like with us, like we keep saying, this travel time to go up to Orono. It used to be before the guy that did our Holland, Malcolm, WFT, it was $300, $365 or something like that to go to Orange and to the PERT plant. It's now $900 and some odd dollars, and sometimes can be more, because the trucks have to sit and wait for a dozer to get them up to the top of the trash hill. And that could be ours, and we have to pay that.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's really, it's like over $900, sometimes $1,000 just for that aspect of it.
Right, so Jim just raised, the potential. I lived in a town in Maine that had a bag fee. In other words, I had to buy bags in order to throw my trash in the dump, as well as paying my taxes. So it does bring it home a little bit more. So that's one way it puts more of the cost on the consumer, right, of the waste. And Brian brought up another issue about pushing those costs back to the packaging people, right, so that the people really responsible for creating all this stuff, which we are consuming, so we are supporting their creation of it, okay? If we created less demand, there would be less creation of it, but all that packaging. So one of the things we're really working on in Stonington is a Shop Local campaign. We're really just trying to get it up off the ground again. Shop Local makes a big difference. Every time you're buying stuff and having it shipped to you in those nice little brown boxes with all that plastic inside, you're creating more waste, double what the item is that you've just bought too, which probably has waste matter in it too. So I saw your hand up here. Here, I'm gonna ask you to talk to the mic.
I'm just curious of the average, if that's peak summer 2,200 or, for Deer Isle, or is that a yearly average?
The 2,200 was 2,200 tons is what we took.
Is that over the course of a few years, or
No,
this year?
just
or?
last year alone. And when
Yeah.
I started, like in 2007, it was around 1,000, tons a year. But you can see how that's elevated with more packaging and everything
Absolutely.
else.
I understand that. My question is how many more people live here year round also compared to, 2011 or whenever?
I think actually our population has gone down some, but the waste stream has changed. I mean, one of the things that we have that's unique to Stonington and not so much Blue Hill is, the commercial bait and stuff, a lot of that when they can't get the herring or anything else, they go to this frozen bait. So, we have that aspect of it. The other thing is too is we're kind of different down here because if you go to Bangor and some of the other stuff, they do curbside, but also too, any of the restaurants and the rest of it, they pay their own commercial garbage and it goes to a plate. Down here, the household and the commercial garbage are mixed together. They don't necessarily have to pay.
Thank you. I didn't realize, I totally forgot about the commercial bait side of things, and that's huge. I understand that.
It's not the bait, isn't it? The packaging? of
It's the
bait?
packaging.
It's the packaging and also it's wrapped in plastic, but that packaging itself is not something that we can, because it's all slimed up. We can't put it in like with a clean cardboard or mixed paper or anything.
So that's an important thing to remember too, is that even if we're recycling at the top of your games, so many people put stuff into recycling that is not recyclable and that fouls the recycling stream. And any kind of tainted material like that, any kind of food waste on any item, just mucks the whole thing up, even in the recycling thing. Abby, I want to turn to you and hear some of what you have to say. We're talking a lot about plastics. We just talked about and Kate's going to talk about this too a little bit, because we do exist in an interesting situation here in a fishing community where we have so much organic waste, but we also have a lot of plastic waste that goes with the industry, right? And you're working really hard to make your sea farm not plastic. So tell us a little bit about that, how you're doing that.
Yeah, it's an uphill battle. So my background's in microplastics research, and being an oyster farmer, when I first purchased the lease, I was sort of floored by the amount of plastic that came along with the oyster farm, and that I had to use for every step of cultivating an oyster, which I'd gotten into the industry because I wanted to help cultivate a sustainable seafood. And the seafood itself is very sustainable, but our infrastructure is absolutely not. So I've been working 2 steps forward, 1 step back, to try to scrutinize every step of my business and figure out where I can look at alternatives to plastic to cultivate oysters. So everything from our ropes, because all of our ropes are plastic, our buoys, and then the actual grow out gear. We use surface technique, which means we have these plastic bags that we grow oysters in. And we know that those plastic bags are leaching not only the hazardous additives, but also microplastics into the water. So for me, my mission is to really try to reduce the amount of plastic that we use in the fisheries, so we really can have long-term healthy waters and healthy seafood.
Yeah, great, thank you. And as you said, it's an uphill battle, the same way it is for the consumers, right? I commented to my partner, we take vitamins and supplements, and it's a huge battle to find them not packaged in plastic containers that then make you could make a midden heap in your backyard within like 2 weeks of taking like vitamin C and vitamin D, right? I mean, it's crazy. I wanted to ask Kate, so, we're a huge percentage of the tons of waste that we're dealing with is food waste, right, and organic matter. So you started Chickadee Composting for a reason, and tell us a little bit about it and how that's going.
Yeah, so Chickadee Compost is operating out of a DEP licensed compost site in Surrey on land that I've leased from Blue Hill Heritage Trust. I got my start in 2021 down here. Thanks to Kathleen's support. I started a small composting operation at the transfer station in Stonington that winter and really got my feet wet in learning the art of composting. It's a science too, but I consider it an art. But I just to jump in about the conversation on solid waste, which hasn't come up yet, is 40% of what we throw away could be composted. So 40% of that 2,200 tons that Kathleen was talking about, and I don't remember what your number was, Jim, 4,300. It's a lot, and Chickadee Compost is designed to produce 1,000 yards of finished compost per year. And I hear your numbers, and I go, wow, I just have to get so much bigger. In 2023. I composted about 230 tons of food waste. So that is really just a drop in the bucket. But I do want to say that a significant amount of that, about 120, doing math in my head, about 60 yards of that was 120 yards of
some amount of it was.
Some significant amount. I'm converting it all in my head. About 60 tons of that was crab bodies coming from the town of Deer Isle that I pick up. So that's a huge amount, and I do really appreciate that partnership I have with town of Deer Isle right now.
Yeah, but go on and tell us a little bit some of the challenges that you face with composting. So why aren't you doing it still at the Stonington transfer station? Why'd you move to Surrey?
Can I answer that?
Oh, yeah, Jim can answer that. What did you do, Jim?
Well, I would just like to say that we would have liked to have her at our transfer station, but we couldn't because the deal we signed with MRC committed all of our trash to Fiberite, to that plant, because they were going to use that waste and produce goods with it, fuel, and so it's honest to say that the MRC owns our trash. We can't do anything about it.
So I've had to create a sort of separate waste stream system for the towns that are served by the Blue Hill Surrey transfer station. With Stonington, I think, it's a lot of factors, and it's the same with a lot of different towns, is it's hard to change the way things are done. And hearing these numbers being thrown around about the cost, I'm realizing I should be charging way more. Jim, I'm looking at you. I should be charging way more, but I'm not going to. It's changing habits, and it's getting towns but also individuals to demand it, and getting individuals to see it not as waste but as a resource. Because we're not just throwing it out when we compost it, we're actually creating a new product that can be then used on our very rocky, poor soils here to improve our home gardens or, local farmland. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, and so there's challenges all around that. And I'm going to let Kathleen point out some of those, because we would like nothing more than to not have to truck waste, all that crab waste, off the island across the bridge and pay for the diesel fuel and all of those kinds of emissions that it takes to truck stuff off. But there are some serious challenges in doing composting on our own. Yeah, Kathleen?
Well, I think it comes down to just what's been mentioned. I mean, people have to be willing to, compost. For us, I mean, it's a capacity issue, a space issue to be able to do it. Or you've got to have somebody else do it. They've got to separate out the product. The other thing is too, if we did it ourselves, then you've got to have some sort of media to be able to do that with. And, that's not an easy thing for us to be able to do. Other places, have more access to maybe like some wood fiber or a type of other things. And we're so far down on the peninsula that makes that really hard, to be able to do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think with you say more for compost and fees, but I mean, Perk and the other ones, Jim's right, they own our trash. And we have no other place for it to go. And, those agreements are lock solid. And if they don't want you, you've got no place for it to go. And you may have to truck it out of state. So I don't know how to say it. You just have to be nice, or you could be taken to the woodshed really financially.
So now these two facilities have rights to the trash, but they're no longer in service. They're no longer active. So wouldn't that make the contract null and void? Wouldn't that allow the contract to be amended in order to have 40% of the trash be composted?
No, I asked our attorney on that when they went out with that case, but no. When the new people bought the PERT plant, the way that contract was structured, it said, they're assigned to whoever, so the contract is followed with it, and I think we've got another 5 years before, we could consider doing something else.
And most municipalities sign these contracts, so that's the thing. Go ahead, Rob.
From a financial standpoint, these people are costing us a lot of money. It's really not fair that they're falling short on their end, and we're footing the bill for it. As a community, we're footing the bill for it.
Well, I can say about the fiberite plant was an idea, and it was a risk, and it was a divided judgment in between the select board at the time in Surrey and Blue Hill. It was a divided vote because, and you have to remember again, the PERT plant had totally changed its operation. So this joinder agreement we signed, the town signed before I was on the board, but it was in 2016. It committed all of our trash to this MRC because they needed it all to make this plant viable. And when it didn't go, we actually, our town decided, well, we'll just send all our trash to PERC, at least it'll get burned, because the fiberite wasn't working, and then the lawyers came after us and we ended up paying a fine because we had this legal contractual agreement that they control it. And so, but honestly, to answer your question, there's no other place for it to go. I mean, it's...
What an opportune time for a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Well, or an opportune time for an entrepreneur. So there's Audrey, Pam, and back here.
Okay, really quickly.
Go ahead, Audrey.
So I think the best or a good way to get people to understand an issue is if it's in their backyard. So Deer Isle is poised, it's famous. People call it just, what about closing the dump? I mean, just as an experiment, I'm not joking. If you close the dump, it could be for a week, better yet, how about a year? Then people will really get it. I'm not kidding. Why not do it? if you can't get rid of this stuff, then you're going to change your habits.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
And it's totally admirable. Of course, not everybody can be Abby and do, like change. We existed for a long time before plastic. The people just won't make the effort. It's too much of a pain to carry your own bags. It's too much to buy in bulk. Just think about it. But I propose closing the dump for a time.
Well, I mean, it's probably more of a DEP thing, but there's regulations that we all have to abide by for disposal of garbage for public health and safety. So, we have to kind of comply with that.
Brian,
and I hear you're on the plastics too. I hate plastics.
And Brian may have something to add about that from the state perspective that requires,
Yeah, we do.
waste to be removed.
There is a requirement that municipalities provide for waste disposal services, but it does get to the point of changing habits, and how do you do that? I mean, one idea is the pay per bag, and we have seen that in municipalities. Studies have shown that municipalities that have a pay per bag system also and recycle have better recycling rates. So it does come that if you do add a bit of a financial incentive to make people recycle, that does work.
Well, it's also putting in the circular economy model.
Right.
If you can't reuse it, repair it, put it back into circulation, then why would we be using that material?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's really hard to get from where we are to that point, but communities are doing it in bits and bobs, and I think there's a lot of ways we could do that with, having our take it or leave it, and have that organized in a way that it could be things, maybe household goods that need to be repaired in one area, things that are perfectly good, and that would really help. I don't know if that goes against our contract, but I think that getting things reused and repaired in our community would really help reduce that
It doesn't
waste.
belong to them before it goes into the dumpster. If we stop it before it gets into the dumpsters, they got nothing, they can't claim it, right?
So,
So-
Kate,
hold
on a second. Go ahead, Brian.
Just to say one thing, one of the things about is like the transfer station has tended to be the location for these types of things, and not just trash, but reusable, the free for taking sheds, but then also transfer stations were the locations where towns that would participate in those things would be where their e-waste was. Mercury light bulb collection, that type of thing. And unfortunately, like a lot of times when transfer stations start to get out of like recycling business, that type of thing, then they start to then they kind of get out of those kind of collections too, and then there's no longer a transfer station to take those other items to. So it's kind of it all goes together.
Mike is hearing job security and all this, and more job security. Pam's got the mic. Kate, I have one more question for you quickly. What kind of brown media are you using at Chickadee?
Most of my brown media is mouse bedding that comes from Jackson Lab in Ellsworth and Bar Harbor.
Right. Yeah.
So it's wood shavings, pine wood shavings mixed with mouse poop and pee.
And to clarify what Kathleen is saying, for us to get a note, because we've done a partial feasibility of this, and we applied for a grant to do another feasibility study, but we would actually have to probably purchase some brown matter in order to make the compost work at the volume that we have the hot matter. Pam.
I'm curious about what the evolution has been on mass burn and trash to energy, because gosh, what was it, 40 years ago? There was, this huge incentive to have and desire to have the plastic in the waste stream because of the BTUs that it would generate. I mean, right? It just creates a much hotter fire, more energy, and that's why these big plants were so opposed to recycling, because of the plastics, which continues to amaze me. I mean, plastic, it's the thing that lasts the longest, and it's always the things we use for the least amount of time. It's just backwards. So how is that going? What's happening with like the PERC plant and the incentives now that all the markets are drying up for recyclables?
Abby, did you want to say, you look like you wanted to say something.
I don't have the facts and figures for PERC, but I just wanted to say a couple things about waste to energy and incineration because it's been really pushed forward, mostly by the plastics industry, as a way for us not to reduce our plastic consumption. And disproportionately, these incinerator plants are put in low or brown and black communities, and the health impacts are enormous. The other part on the incinerators are they produce more greenhouse gases than burning oil or coal. So they're sort of an environmental nightmare that's put forward as a way to solve our plastic pollution crises.
I just want to add to that as well. I was working with some students from MMA last spring semester, and they were doing a sort of evaluation of the different waste management options that they had at MMA and with food waste, and they were looking at a waste to energy, an anaerobic digester that's located over in Exeter. They were looking at composting, and they were looking at PERC because that's where MMA trash is going now. And when they talked to the folks at PERC, when they were open last spring, before they closed down, they said the less food waste they get in the boilers, the better, because it makes their boilers run less efficiently. So another reason why, it adds to the case against the waste to energy option.
I had a comment back here, question?
Yeah, mostly a comment, and Brian sort of mentioned it a little bit, but I think I'm right in making this clarification. Fiberite doesn't own anything until it drives onto the dump property, right? And so, again, it comes back to us finding ways of diverting, rather than going to the transfer station, going to Chickadee Compost, figuring out, so it comes back to us, essentially.
Bill, did you have your hand up? Do you want to say something? You want a mic?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. There are whole programs, a lot of the programs and the grants that we look at are called waste diversion programs for that very reason. Like, we need to divert the waste from the waste stream.
So I would agree with that. I think it's on us to intercept as much of the waste before it gets into the waste stream. Then it doesn't become an issue of they own it or we own it. No, we own it until it gets into the hopper. And I see several ways that we could do that. Any of them are going to cost money, but face it, doing nothing costs a lot more,
Right,
and it's
so-
only going to get more.
And I'm just going to add to this, all of you here tonight who are going to agree that when it costs more money, it's okay, because it should. You need to go out and proselytize that to the voters and to your neighbors and friends, right? Because that's what these public servants then have to deal with, is everybody screaming about their taxes going up for waste disposal. So I'm just saying, it's not an easy job to do that, Carl. Go ahead. And actually, Stephanie had her hand up and Evelyn has her hand up. So, okay.
So quickly, for the last 12 years, I've been composting crab waste. Any of the town manager or the select persons could tell you that I've been hot on that issue on our little farm. But my effort is minuscule, and what I would like to see is more people, more citizens realizing that all that crab waste, all that biological waste, food waste, is a valuable resource. And with a little effort and not a lot of equipment, you can make fine compost. I mix seaweed, sawdust, and crab waste. And in the height of the season, I don't know how many people realize how much weight goes off this island as fish waste. I go once a week in the summer, usually do maybe 5 batches with a 1-ton truck, and I pick up to 10 barrels, 50-gallon barrels of crab waste. Those barrels have to weigh 200-300 pounds apiece. If you add it up, that's a lot of tonnage per week, especially in the height of the season when the crab picking is at its utmost. That's a lot of money that we're paying, the taxpayers are paying, to ship that off the island. And so I'm for intercepting it. I'm also, for the town, trying to work out a way through grant writing or fundraising efforts to create a town recycling setup. And I've been after the town to do this. I'd love to see it at the dump, where again we could intercept that waste stream before it becomes a financial burden to the taxpayers. It would take what's now a big expense item on our budget and turn it into maybe a small, but anyway, a revenue stream.
So Bill, I'm just going to interrupt you because I want to ask, because it's two things in regard to what you're saying. I want to ask Brian about, there are different, so we compost at our house too. We have our own compost. There are different requirements for municipal compost or compost like Chickadee composting than for private composting, are there not? And there are different, requirements that the town.
I know the requirements.
So you know.
I had to learn these. They're very complicated. Composting fish waste is categorized as a type 3C, 1C, I forget what it is, but an individual can only compost up to 5 cubic yards per month, per 30-day period of something like fish waste or food waste. Otherwise, you need to get licensed with the state because managing that amount of waste, as we know how stinky crabs can get, is not for everyone, and so it really is. It's regulated quite tightly by the state.
And Kathleen, I want to follow up on what Bill was saying with you about the whole thing. We had talked earlier in the panel about the fact that there is or there are not markets for recyclables available to our local communities. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
The only thing that we have markets for is either mixed paper or cardboard. There is nothing else for plastics.
Yeah, the plastics, globally, less than 9% of plastics are actually recycled, and they're almost all decycled. And that's usually just a blip on the way to landfill or incineration. And here in the States, I think maybe recycle 4 to 5%. And that's number 1 and number 2 plastics for the most part, I think. The rest is shipped overseas.
We have tried to keep recycling alive in our transfer station because we were allowed to do that when we signed this contract with MRC. If we had a single stream recycling, we could continue that, and we did. And right now, we people who put plastics, it's a limited number of items, but plastics primarily and paper, we have it trucked to Maine. It's an expense. It's really a way for us to try to keep the recycling idea alive for a while, and also we've worked hard to get cardboard out of the waste stream, and actually we made a deal with the staff there that they, for the income we get, which isn't great, but they would get half of that because people throw away so much cardboard, and we were trying to get the staff to pull it out, and so we tried to create an incentive. And the other thing we're trying to do to reduce cost is getting glass out of the waste stream because it's very heavy. There's not much market, but we crush it, and it can be a good fill, but it's very heavy, and at $85 a ton, we try to reduce whatever cost we can.
And Stonington crushes glass also and does glass, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to bang the drum for the EPR for packaging program again because that is, going to reimburse for the costs of recycling and all the costs, your handling costs, your transportation costs, that type of thing, and it's going to be paid at a median per ton cost. So it's not going to be a straight up reimbursement of your cost, but what we'll do is take the cost for the different materials, glass, cans, plastic, the different resins of plastic, come up what the median cost is, and then you'll get that median cost. So if a transfer station has a very efficient program and is running it at less than that median cost, they'll actually get a little bit of a bonus. And if a transfer station is offering a more expensive service, then they'll get not a lesser amount, but they won't get their cost covered.
Yes, Stephanie, Stephanie has a question, Evelyn, Will, and I've got Kate, you wanna say something?
I just wanted to ask a question related to that. We've had the bottle bill for a long time in the state. Is it working well?
Yes. Yes, the bottle bill program is working great. And it actually just went over a major overhaul to make it even better. So the bottle bill collection provides exactly what recyclers want. Very well sorted material, very well sorted aluminum cans, and that's it. This plastic bottle, which is what there is a market for. And it's, unfortunately, we've been having reporting issues with the various manufacturers, but we believe we're getting at least a 60 to 80% recovery rate of material. And the changes that were made, we're going to allow greater efficiencies in the program, so it should be able to be run at a cheaper rate.
Great, and Kathleen, we get other benefits from the bottle bill, don't we?
Yeah, the guys at the transfer station, Mike and Tom. Tom, he started the bottle scholarship fund a long, long time ago. And geez, I tell you, them guys have got some friggin' money in that account. Evelyn, she managed it. She gets the highest interest rate she can. And, but I think we did what, Evelyn, 6,600?
You had 120,000 bottles last year come into the transfer station. Now, I'm gonna tell you, and the bottle fund, it does a terrific job, and all of the people that there work on it, and it does provide very good scholarships for the students that are graduating. But I'm also gonna tell you, because I did ask the question, of the 120,000, which generated roughly $6,000 just last year, and it's consistent every single year, so there is a lot of recycling, which is good. But almost 20% of it is water bottles. And you know where we could save, at least to stop some of the pollution, is instead of, using all these plastic, not throwaway, but recyclable bottles, is we should be using, our regular tap water with, the other part. Filters and stuff like that. And then I think this other lady, then I have one other comment. She came first.
So I came with 3 topics on my mind. One was what Kate is doing, so yay, and taking that compost out of our garbage and using it locally to create new soil is one way of not having the problem with sending all the trash to these other centers. It never ends up in our trash. So that's one. The second one is packaging. And unfortunately, our local market that I shop at regularly packages all the food in plastic. And in the old days, we used to take our little cotton string bags to the market and put all of our food in there, and there was no packaging. So training the supermarkets to think differently about what they're selling us is one way of getting rid of a lot of that garbage. And then the third topic I have in my mind was we are a unified island. So why do we have 2 different transfer stations?
Yes.
I want to answer your second question. Burn Cove Market is owned by an employees cooperative now, and so the employees actually own it, and they are extremely responsive. One of the things, like I said, they're doing way better with cardboard recycling, and the consumer demand or consumer input is what makes the difference, not somebody at the municipal level saying it. So I encourage you, everybody who shops at Burn Cove, I encourage you to shop at Burn Cove, as they have said over and over again, volume equals prices. So the more that you buy at Burn Cove, the lower the prices will go. So everybody complains about their costs being high, it's because the volume isn't there. They can't compete with Walmart, okay? So yes, congratulations for shopping local, and as you shop local, tell them what you want, because they are extremely responsive and they really want to work with you. And then Do you want to make a comment about the municipalities, or do you want to leave it?
No, you know I'll always.
That's why I gave it to you.
I think, for me is, the more that we have to do at the transfer station, the more it's gonna cost the taxpayers. It just is with handling, report, and everything else that you need. And where the change needs to happen is with the manufacturers and the packaging. We need to start eliminating the plastics. One of the things that I have to just drive away from it because it drives me absolutely crazy is when we were doing plastics, Tom, Dave, and now Mike, or whatever it was, it would take us 90 55-gallon drum plastic bags to fill them before we could make one bale of plastic. Of course, now we're not doing it because we can't get rid of it. But, there is nothing wrong with go back to having milk in a wax cardboard box that will just go away. I mean, same thing with the soap thing. I hate seeing the Tide jugs. Why can't we go back to a cardboard box? And it needs to go back to them because municipalities are just not going to have the capacity. So it has to push back on that other end of it. And the plastics it's just really wrecking our environment. We've got the PFAS problem now. Now, the waste to energy plants are going to be going hog wild because they can't get the PFAS out. So now they're going back on because if they get them up to a certain temperature, the PFAS goes away. Then you're not dealing with the environment. So, this is just really a vicious circle. But it starts with the packaging, it starts with the repurposing, and I haven't got enough Tom and Mike's to go around to do all the stuff that we're doing.
Now, as part of the thing about these conversations, right, is we have to understand how much of it comes back to us as individuals. I got two more, it's 10 after 8, amazing, right? We can trash talk all night long.
Let's do it.
But I've got Evelyn and then Will, and then I'm gonna wrap up for the sake of our panelists because some of them have traveled, okay? So Evelyn, go ahead.
I was just gonna mention that we do know at this point in time that, in case you don't know me, I am one of the selectmen for the town of Stonington. Burke, which was where we were taking our product, as Deer Isle was, did close. It has gone and it has now been bought by another company. The anachronism for the company becomes Grace, which is fine. And they are in the process of working with the DEP to get their current permits up to be able to do it and to get rid of all of the trash that was left at the Perk property. The hopefully good news, and both Kathleen and I went up to meet with these people and their engineers to see what their plans were. If they can pull everything off and if they do what they say as far as investment is concerned, they are theoretically going to be a zero waste facility. I've watched their videos. They do have a plant that is actually in operation and is working, not in this state, but in another state, which I think is positive. I looked at their system that they're projecting to do. And in one of my past lives, I actually ran a hazardous waste facility. I think in most cases, it looks like it might be doable. So maybe there's a little bit of a light in the tunnel, but that doesn't solve the problem. What we need to do is send less up to them. So we need to fix our problems that we're generating here first. But maybe there is a light in the tunnel and then everything's not going to go to the landfill, which just drives me nuts.
Yeah, thank you for that light. Will?
First off, I want to thank everyone for being here and giving us your time. I'm curious what the world of eco and biodegradable containers look like. We've all seen them. We see them in the co-op. We see disposable, biodegradable serving utensils, again, cardboard containers for soap products and beverages, and what is going on with that? I mean, it exists, and why can't we expand on it? And also, why can't we just put our foot down to the plastic companies and say, no more, we're not gonna buy from your products? If you use plastic, when we know that this stuff is out there, you need to make the change.
And that is for your congressional delegation who couldn't be here tonight, but will be back on March 20th. Because that's a federal issue. But Kate, you're going to say something about this.
Yeah, I would just add, there are a lot of paper products out there now that say they're biodegradable. But in the world of recycling and composting, biodegradable doesn't really mean anything. It means it eventually biodegrades, whether that's tomorrow or in 200 years. And so biodegradable is basically a meaningless word. What you need to be looking for if you really want things that will break down, say in your backyard compost or in a commercial compost facility, are things that are certified by an organization called BPI, which is confusing because it's called the Biodegradable Products Institute. But ignore that. Just look for the BPI logo. There's also something called the CMA, and that's the Compost Manufacturers Alliance. They also have a certification process, and there are also some European certifiers. So any of those paper products that have those, you know are good. You know that they can be composted. There are a lot of things, if you're ordering this, paper products on Amazon, there are a lot of things that claim they're compostable, say they're biodegradable, and then there's a lot of mislabeled stuff. So be wary and really check the labels.
Abby, do you want to add something?
I get a lot of questions about bioplastics and compostable plastics, and unfortunately there isn't one silver bullet there. There's a lot of greenwashing that's going around with a lot of the labels. And like Kate said, same as paper products, unless it's home compostable, it's going to have to go to a high heat, high energy intensive industrial composting facility. And usually if you throw that in your trash, it's not going to end up there. So right now there's not an immediate alternative to go to or that I recommend when you are looking at compostable or bioplastics, because most of those still contain a lot of the hazardous additives that are in plastic or petroleum, some level of petroleum in that bioplastic.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. If I'm not currently certified by MOFGA, but if I were to get certified by MOFGA, I could not allow any of those bioplastics or really many of the paper products with the PLA lining in them, because MOFGA would not accept that.
What about cardboard? As in cardboard packaging, can you shred cardboard and then use it as your ground material?
I could, yeah. I don't bother, but I could if I had a shredder and a lot of time.
Did everybody hear that the question was, can you shred cardboard to use for the brown matter?
Yeah, so some cardboard ends up in my piles. I get lots of paper towels and napkins, which are fine. I do get some BPI stuff that goes through. It disappears in a couple weeks in my piles. My piles get super hot, so I can compost all that stuff. It's not adding a lot of valuable nutrients to my compost, so I try to avoid it, but it does go in there sometimes.
So our boots on the ground here, Mike had something he wanted to add, so I want to give him a chance to add his say.
As far as the plastics go, you're not going to get rid of it because all the liquor bottles are starting to go to plastic now. I noticed that lately when we've been doing and as far as the cardboard for the milk jugs, those have all got plastic in them. They've got the little plastic covers in them, so you're not going to get away from it. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I started in October. I've been a year. We had 40 bales of cardboard and paper. There was already some there before I started, and already we've got 8 bales of cardboard, 1 bale of paper.
That's awesome. Congratulations, Mike. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's 2 more people in the audience. I just want to ask a couple questions, one question each of, and then I'm going to give everybody up here a last word. Jim, I wanted to give you a chance to say something if you wanted to. Jim, DRL Town Manager.
Thanks. If you're an economist, you know the term external economies, and I hate to say we all love our externalities. I unearthed a study that the Hancock County Planning Commission did in 1979 to establish the feasibility of a waste incinerator in Blue Hill to serve the 7 or 8 towns in western Hancock County. And I think that idea would probably not go very far now. It was feasible then, but we do love the fact that the waste goes away. And the idea of closing the dump is such a nightmare to a town manager, because then we'd be back to burning plastic in burn barrels in our yards. And we don't want that. So I think a regional response is appropriate. And I really appreciate what DEP and the state have been doing. We've got fantastic programs for recycling things like fluorescent light bulbs and batteries and some of the really toxic stuff that we do not want at landfill. We don't want it anywhere near us. Needs to be recycled. But we're going to have a very difficult time with plastic. And my understanding is, as we wean ourselves from burning gasoline in our cars, that oil is now going to making ever more cheap virgin plastic. And that's going to be a hard trend to fight. And I hope we do fight it.
Thank you so much. And speaking of plastics, one of the organizations in the state that does do something with plastics is in southern Maine. It's Eco Maine, and Catherine Oak is here with us from Eco Maine tonight. Catherine, did you want to add anything?
Sure. I think we're lucky because we do have markets for the plastics, the number one, number two. They're domestic markets, so that's a good thing. They're turning into more products, so it falls into that circular economy. So we're pretty fortunate there. But there are a lot of plastics, all those film plastics, we have no market for that, and we can't recycle them at our facility. So, you know, and that's a big one. The film plastics, the flexible packaging has really just expounded, and we have so much of that now. And it's just made transportation lighter, keeps things preserved longer for us. And one of the things that was burning my tongue was eco-modulation, and with the packaging and that component of that framework. And I just wondered if I can pump back to you on that, Brian.
Yeah, so there will, as I said, we were going to, part of the packaging, EPR for packaging program is feeing the manufacturers. A fee is going to be based on how much it costs to handle their packaging material, and it will include eco-modulation fees. So if they produce packaging that is not recyclable, they will be feed, and if they produce packaging that contains toxic materials, that will also increase their fee. So then the whole idea is that they will then shift their packaging to a more recyclable piece of material.
And I want to encourage everybody on your way out to check out the 44 North packaging, where they made that decision to not use lined bags anymore. So their samples are here on the table. Last words, since you had the mic in your hand, Brian, I was going to start with you and go down the line here.
Well, like I said, I'll just bang the drum again. It's going to be a couple more years before we can get payments out to municipalities, but there is help on the way to deal with packaging material.
Thank you. Kate.
I just say thank you so much for having us and for this great conversation. I am all about local solutions, and I think we can find some together here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and be kind to your select boards. They are trying. It's a huge challenge, and I've been wanting to say, when someone brought up the idea of closing the transfer station, our transfer station used to be open 7 days a week, and we closed it to 5, and you can't believe the pushback we've gotten for just not being open to whenever I want to throw it away, I want to throw it away. And so anyway, thanks for coming and listening to this.
I don't know, trash is just such an overwhelming issue, and it is a very hard one because, you know, transfer stations are on the last end of it, and there's high expectations, and we don't always have all the solutions, and it is such a huge thing, whether we're dealing with contracts that we either can't get out of, you know, the outfits, the national that control some of the landfills and some of the other stuff, you know, that's really out of our wheelhouse and stuff with it. But, you know, if we combine transfer stations, then we've got to have more area, you've got to have a bigger road, you've got to have a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't see there's really any cost savings there. there might be some conveniences, but you'd really have to scale up because, you know, the population in both towns, not saying that, you know, might not be doable, but it would take a lot of work to be able to get that logistics of making something operational and expanding recycling and stuff. But, you know, I just want to thank everybody for coming and having the conversation. Part of the series is trying to help people, you know, understand a little bit about what we're doing. You know, you can't always get the answers that you want at your town meetings because we're trying to drive 70 articles through and get people out through the door. I would say be kind to your transfer station people. They can't always help it if you have to pay a fee and stuff. They just try to do the best they can do.
And don't start running out the door, because we have one more question for you all too. Avery.
I'm just going to add to be kind to yourselves as well. I think walking into a grocery store filled with plastic can be very overwhelming. So focusing on the things that you can do instead of what you can't, you know, these things take time. Focusing on buying secondhand and the attainable things that you can do today instead of trying to do it all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll second that. Yeah, it's an overwhelming issue, especially just thinking about the plastics component. And this is really an upstream producer responsibility that we need to, you know, we're all downstream from that. And as individuals, I think if we make enough noise, then that those upstream changes are going to happen. So thank you all for being here and lending your voices and wanting to talk trash.
So wait a minute, don't move. Kathleen said it, Jim said it, Bill said it. The transfer station is the end of the line, okay? And it's externalizing the trash. It's us externalizing our waste. So what did you guys all learn tonight? What's the big thing you took away? What's your key takeaway? Mike's on you.
How about use less?
Use less? What else? Reduce. So we have a lot of power as consumers. So what we need to do is stop buying this stuff, because that goes back to the packaging companies and it goes back everywhere. I want to thank the panel. Let's give them a big round of applause. Really grateful for you spending your time with us. And thanks all of you for doing a conversation. We so appreciate it. There is a sign-up sheet if you want to get emails from the town of Stonington. There's information here as you go out the door. Please help yourself to food so we don't waste it. And have a wonderful evening. Be safe. Thank you. Yeah.
Absolutely.